And Trafigura thought, well, we could have earned a lot of bucks by buying this Coconava and rented a ship just for caustic washing, and now you want us to pay tens of thousands of euros for the waste? No way. That proved to be a pretty stupid move. And so the ship started going to other countries. So the next one they went to was Ivory Coast, and that came back to the start of the video. But wait, why wouldn't Abidjan port said no to this kind of smelly stuff? Remember what I said about Trafigura playing the long game to build ports around the world? Abidjan's port was part of his project before, which means, well, this is the funder of the port, so they have really close relationships with port authorities. And the port authorities were discovered to actually bypass environmental authorities to let them offload the waste. But how about the company that processed this waste? Out of nowhere, there was this company called Tommy that was founded just a month before Trafigura arrived in Abidjan. Tommy is not just small. It's newly founded, it has never had any projects before, and it doesn't have the capabilities for processing such toxic and harmful waste. And the crazy thing is, in its proposal, is that it's going to send the waste to somewhere that is an open-air landfill. They didn't do any background checks and thought, we are going to work with Tommy. Weird, is it? And Tommy even said, hey, we have a pretty good price for you. If APS charged you 1,000 euros per cubic meter, we charge you only $35. That was around the same price that APS offered before. So Trafigura thought, hey, this is great for us. Did Trafigura not know about this? No, they knew. They knew so much that when authorities tried to check this, they asked Tommy to give them a false invoice that charged them a much higher price. That's how we know that Trafigura actually knew that $35 per cubic meter is not going to cut it. It's too low and it's not supposed to be the market price. And as we can see here, corruption runs really deep in the Ivory Coast. Without that, this would never happen. So what happened to the waste after Tommy took it from the port? They're packed in different trucks, and they sent truck drivers to 18 different spots to dump the waste. A driver at the time said that after the other worker opened the door behind and dumped the waste, he actually felt his eyes itching and he thought, this is something awful. But by then, it was too late. A lot of this waste is dumped into the river, the canals, where people get their water. And then the horror movie began. Abidjan was thrown into chaos overnight. People got sick, they were sent into hospital. 17 people died in the following months. 100,000 people were sent to the hospital because of this smell. The thing is, to this day, no one knew what's exactly inside the waste because Trafigura refused to reveal what's inside, and it was by the time too late for authorities to examine this waste. People started panicking and they protested on the streets because they knew that authorities were in on it. And Ivory Coast, being a small country with not a lot of resources and in political turmoil, it didn't have the resources to face such a huge medical and public health crisis, so it had to ask for international help. But for a lot of people, it's not just being angry. Their life was adversely affected to a great scale. They lost their homes because the environment was contaminated, they can't drink the water that they normally drank, and a lot of people lost their jobs as well. And for the people who didn't have a choice to quit their job, they had to actually keep working without protective equipment in these environments. So what did Trafigura do? So of course they denied that this had anything to do with them. They said, hey, this is just a coincidence.
We do transfer waste from sea to land, but once it's on the ground, it's no longer our responsibility.
Because they did the caustic washing in international waters, no countries could hold them accountable either. But how about the dumping of waste in Ivory Coast? Ivory Coast was experiencing a political turmoil, and the government was extremely corrupted. And Trafigura knew about this, so they sent a big enough amount of money to the government, so the government agreed to never hold them accountable at court. And that's why a lot of the victims of this case were not served justice until many years later in courts in other countries. One of them is in the Dutch court, and that's because there's a law banning any waste from the EU to Africa. And because Trafigura's waste actually touched a little bit of ground of Amsterdam port, it counted as waste from the EU, even though the EU might not be the producer of such waste. And the same year, about 30,000 victims filed a civil law case in the UK because the London company was also part of what happened in the Ivory Coast. They won $45 million. Now, it sounds pretty good, right? But if you divide it by 30,000, each person only get $1,500, which is not much, considering the monthly salary of the Ivory Coast is $500 US. And in 2008, the Netherlands also brought charges to Trafigura over how it brought waste from the EU to Africa. They won as well, and Trafigura had to pay €1 million to the Netherlands. But what it did in the Ivory Coast was never held accountable. And a lot of victims in this case are still looking for justice to this day. Did Trafigura stop? Of course not. Only a few months later, Proba Koala went to Norway, and Trafigura hired another company to process the waste. Only, of course, the company also did not have capacity to do it. There was a gas leak, and a lot of the people near that village and port reported being sick again. And that's how Trafigura was found to be guilty. But then, Norway didn't really have a law to hold this accountable. So once again, Trafigura escaped its accountability. So what happened to Proba Koala that contains so much harmful waste? It was sent to a shipyard in Bangladesh to destroy ships. Now, it's an infamous shipyard that destroys a lot of horrible ships that are no longer working, and the process of that contains a lot of toxic materials as well. But that's another story for another episode. And even Bangladesh authorities were like, no, we don't want it this time, no matter how much money you give us. And so Proba Koala went through a facelift. After a few years, it changed names, but eventually it was destroyed in a shipyard in China. When there's a price tag for human life, companies have become murderers that aren't held accountable because of these cross-continent crimes. And they couldn't be arrested in a lot of cases like this. What do you think people can do to hold companies like Trafigura accountable? Leave a comment down below and let me know if there are other environmental crimes that you'll like me to cover. That's it for today's episode, and I hope to see you for the next one.